Muchas gracias. Bueno, buenos días amigos, bienvenidos.
This is my presentation on GeneXus and the IT context. I usually make this presentation on Wednesday afternoons, but only in very special occasions do I do it the other way around, do I make it on Monday morning. Last time we did this was in 2010 in the GeneXus event number 20, and we did that during the morning. This was not because it was the 20th GeneXus event, but because we thought that something very important was going on and the world of applications development was changing. And that was the announcement of our smart devices generator. We then said that after the success of smartphones and the advent of tablets, the world of applications development was changing more than ever, and our response to that was a smart devices generator. That was the announcement that we made on 2010, and that was the reason why we did it in the morning. We're no longer in 2010, we're in 2012. So one of the interesting questions is what happened with all the things that we mentioned, what happened with smart devices, that whole revolution that we mentioned. And if you take a look at this, well, a lot of things have happened. Steve Jobs passed away, and there were planetary lawsuits or thermonuclear lawsuits between Samsung and Apple. Nokia changed its strategy, etc. So there's an amazing number of things that have happened in that environment. So I think that to know the context of what's going on is very important. So throughout this event, we have made a series of presentations on that. I recommend you the one by Jose Elias this afternoon, who will give us an overview of all that's going on in the industry. But when I prepared this, I said, well, many things have happened, but I tried to be a pragmatic developer. If I make a living out of making software, maybe I don't want to know everything that's going on. But on the other way around, I want to know the minimum things possible that will be relevant for me, and which will be those things that are important for me. And so I started thinking, and I made myself a series of questions that I will try to answer. The first of them is this one here. Smart devices. Have they been a fashion? Not just smart devices, also tablets. Have they been just a fad, something that was fashionable, or is it a real strong trend that's here to stay? This is the first question because it's the easiest one of all. This is not just a fashion, it's actually a strong trend. It's actually an explosion. Let's take a look at these sales figures. These are just sales figures of smartphones in the second quarter of 2012. Just that. There are many important things here. For example, Android sold almost 100 million of devices if compared to the 48 that it had sold in 2011. And Apple went from 19 to 28. This is maybe detrimental to Apple because many people were waiting for the iPhone 5 to be launched. So I think that numbers will be different. The numbers that went down are the numbers from BlackBerry. Microsoft doubled its figures, and I think it will continue to go along that trend. So what's going on in the smartphones world is very clear. It is a disruption and a very important progress. Another important thing in this market is that there are no winners, and no one's expecting to be the winner. No one's saying, I will totally dominate this market. No, it's quite fragmented, actually. What happened with tablets? Well, in terms of tablets, we saw another explosion. Some 60 million tablets were sold in 2011, and we are expecting to see figures of 120 million of tablets. So the number will be doubled in terms of sales. On the contrary, as to what happens in smartphone market, which was very dispersed. Here we have a clear leader, which is the iPad. And this is the one that's defining many strategies that I will be commenting on. So, from a hardware point of view, this is working in a spectacular way. If I think about being a pragmatic developer, well, actually, I'm trying to make software, so how does this affect me? Or in other words, do we use software in these phones? Yes, so the question is, are apps being used? And once again, the answer is very easy. Yes, and they're used very widely. So that you have an idea, recently Apple announced that it had reached 700,000 applications, but the most important figure from that piece of news is that Apple paid developers, has already paid $5.5 billion. So this means that every time that an application is sold, they're usually very cheap, $1, $2 in average, or $5. Apple keeps 30% and pays 70% to developers. And like this, selling $1 at a time, it has sold $5.5 billion. This is something that's absolutely new. This is a distribution channel for us as software developers that we had never had before. We had never found something like this, of being able to sell the planet in such a way, in such an easy way. Of course, from those $5.5 billion, most of them go to game manufacturers. But we, as developers of other types of applications, have a lot to learn from this. Actually, on Wednesday afternoon, I recommend you a presentation from the people who made the game Kingdom Rush, which is among the top 10 games in the world. And they will be telling us about their story. And maybe they will tell us what component they have from those $5.5 billion. Well, that's another thing. But they will tell us how they did in this experience in the new world. This just belongs to Apple. But this is not the only store. Actually, one of the important things is that the model that a major manufacturer in the industry has a store through which applications are sold, this is a model that's becoming stronger and stronger and becoming more successful. The second example is Google Play, which used to be the Android market. And it's also around 700K applications. And it announced that it already had 20 billion downloads, sorry. And we also have Microsoft that's beginning to work very strongly in a store. So, these two first questions were kind of easy for me. Smartphones and tablets are used more and more, and they are running more and more software. In 2010, this was a hunch that we had, but now we know this for sure, and we know that that is what's going on. The other question I have is, what has changed? In 2010, which were the things that worked in one way and now maybe have changed, or the world has gone in another direction? Where were the surprises? One of the surprises that we saw is this one. At least it was a surprise for me. What we have here is a picture of the 3 generations of Samsung Galaxy phone, S1, S2, and S3. What's the difference, the clearest difference between S1, S2, and S3? The size. So, with time, phones became larger. First one has 4 inches, second 4.5, and the third one 4.8 inches. So, they became larger, and they grew so much that someone in Samsung thought, well, what happens if I do it much bigger, and if I have a 5.5-inch phone? And they did this one, the Samsung Galaxy Note, which is a phone which is halfway between a smartphone and a tablet. This was an experiment, and it turned out to be quite a huge success in the market. I have clear evidence of this because in Peso Book I know what devices are being used, and the 4th device that's being used in Android is the Galaxy Note. So this was much more successful than expected in terms of large phones. This was so strong that it ended up breaking one of the major lines in Apple of not modifying the size of iPhone. However, iPhone 5 increased in size. In this case, it didn't increase in the same way the Android ones did, because the form factor in those cases was kept the same. But in this case, Apple went through another direction. It increased the height of the phone, and the width was the same. What it did was to add one more line of icons in the screen. So phones changed their size, and they became larger with time. This happened with phones. And what happened with tablets? Phones became larger, and tablets became smaller. It's incredible. Actually, it's not that they became smaller. I believe that the explanation is that the dominance of iPad is so big, it's in the 10-inch market, so that competitors started to try with other sizes, and they became very successful in 7-inch tablets. The one who started with that trend was Amazon with Amazon Kindle Fire, and then Google with the Google Nexus 7, and I believe this will continue. And why am I telling you all this? Because it turns out that if I need to make an application, in the past, we thought that we would have two sizes, smartphones and tablets, and it turns out that we no longer have that. We have a whole range of sizes to build for. Why is this relevant? Because if I want to make an application, then the best thing is not to make the application larger or have larger icons, but we want to have the application to be customized to the new size. We had thought about this in GeneXus, but now it is extremely easy for us to create a new layout and to build an application that will be customized for each tablet or phone with a size that is customized to that phone without having to rewrite the logic, just by doing a new layout. I believe that's a very interesting advantage that we have in the GeneXus community. The people who are doing programming manually end up having to add a lot of ifs in order to know what the layout will be like. And this is very important in terms of these applications, to be size customized. Next question of a pragmatic programmer. Well, this applies to just any programmer or developer. For the first time within the GeneXus community or outside the GeneXus community, we are always making these questions. Why do I have to build a native application? Why cannot I do it in a mobile web with HTML5? And that's it. And the answer of developers has usually been in favor of doing it through mobile web. Why? Because it offers a series of important advantages. For example, it can be adapted to any platform. I don't need one version for Android, for iOS, or for BlackBerry. It can be customized to different sizes. I don't have to learn anything new, etc. So there are a series of reasons, very important reasons, through which the developer thinks that they have to do it through mobile web. Even though all those reasons are reasons which are good for the developer, here we have a problem, because the world of smart devices is not a world that's governed by developers. It's a world that's governed by the end users. And the end users, due to different details, don't like mobile web applications. They like native applications much more. Why? Because they respond quicker, because they can see it better, because they are better customized to the philosophy of the phones. Well, there's a whole range of reasons that explain why it's much better to do native applications and mobile applications. Now, the world of smart devices is dominated by users and is no longer dominated by us, developers. You could say, well, this is an idea that I have, or do I have any evidence of this? And the best evidence that I have is the people from Facebook, what they said. Mark Zuckerberg, its CEO, who announced recently that one of the biggest mistakes had been to betting too much on HTML5. The title of this is somewhat tricky because you're saying that, but in fact they're not talking about HTML5 as a standard. They were talking about HTML5 on mobile. Facebook, in its first generation of applications for mobile, they were all done based on HTML5. That was a failure. They were strongly criticized by users, so they redid all their applications. Zuckerberg acknowledged this once they had finished all the generation of native applications. So, something very important today is that it is clear that the great dominator for web applications is to do native applications. This is not a war that's over. Maybe in the future we might go to web once again. Those of us who have been working here long enough know that this is a sort of pendulum that goes one way and then goes another way. Maybe we will have stronger browsers and maybe the web will be stronger. But this, if I program manually, this is terrible because I need to have 3 or 4 different programming lines, and for GeneXus that's exactly the same. So once again, it's an advantage that we have in terms of people who are programming manually. Well, to sum up, what I can say is that the revolution that we thought would happen in 2010 really happened, and now it's much more evident. So much more evident that major hardware manufacturers that could not adapt and did not have an important offer of tablets or smartphones that were important enough are now being downsized or being having a lot of layoffs. Ultimately, if you see what's happening, we can sum it up through 3 words. What's going on is that we're moving towards a world where IT is anytime, anywhere, and any device. That's what sums up what's going on right now. We want to interact with the systems, data, applications from anytime, anywhere, and in any device. That's what's being defined nowadays. Getting back to the pragmatic developer, we could say, well, this is okay. How can GeneXus help me? Well, our reply from GeneXus was what we announced in 2010 and what we launched in 2011, which is GeneXus Evolution 2. It had a series of themes, mainly the smart device generator, and I remember very well that this was released in Mexico in March, and when we did so, I told that for me to release a version was like sending a child to college. You work a lot of time, you prepare everything, but the moment of truth comes when then this program needs to fly on its own, where the kid goes to college and needs to resolve things on its own. And the same thing happens with this. Once you release it into the market, you need to see what the result is. What I can tell you today is that the kid not only went to college, but has already sat for many examinations. So I can tell you how he did in those examinations in those first months.
The first one is an indicator that is very relevant to us. The number of people who are already using the application, which is Evolution 2. Of all the customers that worked with Evolution 1, 30% is now working on Evolution 2. That migration from Evolution 1 to Evolution 2 is something that we consider will move faster in the future without any further complications. It's more different when you have to migrate from former versions into this version. We organize a series of talks and briefings with the community to talk about how they went about this migration from that X version to this new version. And I recommend a presentation by Enrique Almeida, who's going to tell us about his experience in a very broad database with this type of migration. So after releasing the version, we release Upgrade 1, and I'm now announcing that we're about to release next Monday the Upgrade 2. Upgrade 2 has some improvements plus fixes to develop smart devices and application purchase, which are business models that are becoming more and more successful. After the break, after this presentation, there will be one by Mr. Bergman, who will talk a little bit more in detail about Evolution 2 and Upgrade 2. But the thing is, what happened with the smart devices generator, or what applications were made with the smart devices generator? Was it useful for final consumers? What sort of applications were made? Were they successful or not? Well, that's a very difficult to answer question. As you know, not everybody tells us about when they do an application. We never find out when they do that. So just to give you an idea, I went to the GeneXus showcase where people voluntarily publish their applications. And these are some of the applications that have been developed with GeneXus. Some of them are very relevant. They were quite successful in many of the markets. So these are the ones I would like to share with you. For example, Mirada Cultural was an application for one day. It lasted one day. For example, Heritage Day in Uruguay. They do something similar in Sao Paulo. All the city does one thing in one day, so we did an application for just one day. So we had to do that on a very cheap budget. So we did that with the GeneXus Brazil people, and during that day it was very successful. This is one of the cases. Another very useful final user, end user application was by the Mexico GeneXus people for the metro in Mexico DF. Normally, every day they have between 700 and 1,000 downloads, so this is an end-user application that was very successful. These two apps are free of charge. I have another example, which is called Camino a Brasil 2014. This was very expensive because I lost in a bet here. This application will Ignacio Roqueta has a presentation on his experience about this. He's the author of this presentation, and he will tell you about how I lost in that bet. He did not pay me in another bet we had, so I hope he will mention that. I think that will be on Tuesday. But in any case, this is an application where you get all the news about this soccer championship. And as we get closer to the first round of football matches, you will get it available in all the countries of the region if you are fighting for your team to be part of the shortlist. So this is something that people will have to refer to. Another interesting example is called Zeta Cuentas. It's not been, it's being produced, but this is an application from Zeta Software people. This is a Uruguayan company that has an RP for small and medium enterprises. They are very innovative, and they have used the idea of selling the software as a service, and they are number one in that area. So they are currently working in this application, which is basically to control for personal expenses control or recording, and they are using the idea of anytime, anywhere, any device. If I'm going to enter my expenses, I want to do it right away. I go to the supermarket and I just do it immediately, not when I get home. So that is the idea behind Zeta Cuenta. It's a very simple application, but it moves along that line. And I think that over time, this is going to be very important in the future of Zeta software. Finally, I want to talk about an application by my friends La Rola and Asociados. Where is the cashier? It tries to respond to one thing. Where is the cashier? Or the ATM? Where can I find an ATM? We have to go to the, in other countries, ATM, automatic teller, and I go there to get cash. So we always wonder, where is the next ATM? This application will tell you just that, where it is located. So I would like to highlight that this is a very simple application. But one highlight is the importance of applications, or how you can tap into them if you have your device always available and your device knows where it is. We're not used to having this device that is always with us and that knows where it is. With that, I can obtain new access. For example, this one, which is very obvious. I am here, so what other things near me? Do I have an ATM? Do I have a restaurant near me? Is there a golf link near me? That's the first set of things. These are the first applications, or first generation of applications relative to geolocation, because people are looking for new forms of geolocation. On Wednesday, I will talk about a very innovative way of combining payment means and geolocation. Another point about where's the nearest ATM. Do you know La Roble Asociados is a leader in the core banking system? It's a very complex system for the operation of banks. Now, they did not start their mobile strategy by they have Bank Total, which is their flagship product. They didn't start by doing Bank Total Mobile. That would be huge. They started with, where is the ATM? Which is the best strategy. If you have a software company with large software, don't do the mobile version of your software, because that's going to be very complex and it will be time consuming. I think that one solution would be to start simply by using easy things that will be good for end users, how to use the new upgrades, how to use new services, many things that we need to learn by doing smaller things and then increasing into more sophisticated things. But in the end, how did they do? Were they successful or not? So they told me that at least they have over 250,000 downloads. The marketing department asked me to say 250,000 downloads, which sounds better. So far, I can tell you that GeneXus X Evolution 2 passed the test, it did well, and we have demonstrated, or it has demonstrated, that it is useful, very useful for smart device applications. So we are already working in the next version, the one that comes after Evolution 2, which is called GeneXus Tilo. And it's a key name. And there is a special track on Wednesday with reference to GeneXus Tilo. And today I just want to mention three things. First, we are completing a scenario that was missing in smart devices, which is what we called the offline scenario. By offline, I mean, it's clear by the picture. When we have a salesman that is taking an order and he wants to record that order regardless of whether it has a connection or not, that would be basically an offline scenario. Very easy to describe, but very difficult to implement. We have been working with Tilo, and we have some customers who already use this version, offline version. And I understand that we have Conaprole, which is a dairy firm in Uruguay, that is using this version, the offline version. We have another company in Brazil that is also dairy farm. And we have Sancor, another dairy industry in Argentina, and in Colombia a similar one. So maybe the offline was for dairy firms. I don't know, or they have problems with connections. I don't know why, but all of them are in the dairy field. So if any of you is not a dairy firm, welcome to this trial team. If you are a dairy company, queue up. So the second thing is that Tilo has included, but this is a detail, but quite important. All the things that I mentioned about the smart devices are very good, but please, this does not imply that web applications are not important. As television did not finish with the radio, the smart devices will not destroy the web applications. They are alive and well, and we are working with new things under TILO. What things are we working with? They are not revolutionary things. We just want to evolve so as to get to two things. First, to be more and more efficient. We want applications to be quick, to use less bandwidth. That's the first thing. The second line we are trying to pursue is that the user interface is more and more sophisticated, so that the interaction is better. And that's why I brought a video of an application generated with a TILO version, and you will see how it interacts without the user can modify without having to modify the page or refreshing the page. One is called Fuel Ajax and the other is Single Space Application. There's a line that starts with a lecture by Nicolás Cardelino, and he will tell you about this new application. That's the second thing I wanted to talk about TILO. And the third feature, and one of the reasons why we included this presentation in the morning, it's called Windows, short names. It's called Windows 8. And I want to invite Eduardo Mangarelli. Eduardo, I have introduced you many, many times as Eduardo. Now you are Eduardo Mangarelli, Director of Technology for Latin America from Microsoft. Welcome to this meeting. Thank you for the invitation, Nicolas. Thank you for being part of this. And before I start, let me refer to some aspects of Windows 8 that I would like to share. We have probably read news about the re-engineering and the changes in Windows 8. And some of the aspects that I need to share with you have a lot to do with the smart devices, the new architecture of devices that the industry has. And we are used to Intel architecture, but today in many of the devices, the world of ARM and the different companies building ARM really change the whole setting. The processors are lighter, they consume less, they adapt best to mobile devices. By rethinking Windows and Windows 8, for the first time we have done re-architecture of Windows so that the same operation system works in Intel structures and ARM structures. So this is a new world before us with new tablets, PCs, laptops with different formats. And if we read the news over the last 6 weeks, we've seen how large producers of hardware have announced different formats, some that can be folded or are collapsible. And this is having access to new architectures, to new devices, by having the same operation system to cover all the scenarios. And this is interesting. I say one single operation system. For developers, this is interesting because you can think of the same application developed running in the same way in different formats. And part of this running in the same way in different formats has to do with same application that responds to the same characteristics and functionalities, whether I am in a touch scenario or a keyboard and mouse scenario, because one thing does not substitute another, and we know that the coexistence of multiple devices and the multiple ways of interacting will continue. So we need to respond. We need to respond to the consumer's needs in the best way so as to meet the requirements with this wealth of new devices in the market. The second thing I would like to share with you has to do with the opportunity for developers by marketplace and stores and applications, and how they have given us new mechanisms to access consumers and monetize applications that we didn't know so far. Today, consumers, by just clicking away, can download the application and pay for the application, which for us is a business model that is revolutionary, that is in its early stages. And you also mentioned the different marketplaces and the distribution model Today, the standard in industry is that marketplaces distribute 70% of the profits with the developers and 30% is for the store or the marketplace. We have decided to incorporate the concept of store, and we call it Windows Stores in Windows 8, to distribute applications and to distribute exactly the same application to any device in any architecture, in any format, 4, 3, 16, 9, IRM architectures or Intel architectures. And we have also decided to change the equation of profitability for developers. So when one application is commercialized in the Windows Store, at the beginning there is a 70-30 ratio, 30% for the store, 70% for the developers. But once the application goes over $25,000, it starts to be successful, and when it goes beyond $25,000 in 1 month or 1 week or 6 months afterwards, the equation changes, 80-20 ratio. So for developers, 10% more margin of profit or profitability, which is direct, and it's taken from the commercialized applications. And for those of you who are in the world of applications in stores, you know how valuable that 10% is, how it can become a significant advantage in your profitability. If we add to this the fact, and today we talked about numbers, that the projection as from October 26, which is the date when we start commercializing, marketing new Windows 8 devices, 12 months ahead, the projection is 400 million devices in the markets that will run Windows 8. 400 million devices in 1 year. Yes, the marketing people told us 2/5 of the projection, if you like. But it's too complex. It's too complex for the equation. But then, 400 million devices. It's almost 500,000, right? Or 500,000. Well, we could do our calculations in whichever way you like. The interesting thing is that that figure is going to be integrated by devices in different formats. The traditional model of PCs, laptops, tablets in different formats. So let us not talk about figures. Let us talk about what we have been thinking about. Here I have with me a tablet with Windows 8. We said that on October 27, this will be available in the market, but some are available. You can download them if you are a subscriber. This is included in the final version. If you want a trial version, there is one you can get for 90 days free of charge. So the first thing I will do, I would log in here with my picture password. It's easy to log in if I have the touch platform. And first of all, this is navigation. And this is the experience of navigating in the new start. I not only have icons, this is what we see first. We call them tiles because each of them can be used to run an application but also refresh themselves, and I can show the user information in real time about what's going on. The first thing I will do then, I could navigate from one application to another, but first of all, let's see one of the applications, and this is not a joke, this is a real thing, this is real time, it's the same heading that we will see if it's real time connection. This is installed, this is part of the installation, part of Windows 8, this is for finance. The important thing are the characteristics of this application. First, we have looked for a model where applications take 100% of the exposure to user. You see there are no menus, no buttons. It's 100% of the relevant content for the user. If I want to see the actions, I have the bar, the app bar, the bar that allows me to bring certain operations or do certain actions. But the other two concepts that I want to share, which are independent of the application, but the application is a good example to show them, are the cross-cutting services, the cross-cutting services to the whole operation system. The first one is the share. service. From any application, I can call the share application. And the interesting thing is that the applications that come up allow me to share. These are the applications that I have installed in my device that implement the capacity to share. So by integrating, this is very interesting. Those who developed the finance application never thought about whether to share it through mail or what. The application simply subscribes to all the sharing mechanisms, and this allows me this level of integration with any application. The other cross-cutting concept which I want to share is search. When I talk about search, this is contextual to where I'm standing. For example, I do an action in finance, and here in real time I have the actions that are the result of my search. From this search, I can also look in all the applications installed that have a search system. This is interesting because the companies that work with marketing see this right away. This is one way in which they can expose their application to users and consumers, regardless of whether they have to open up the application as users. As a result of a search, I, the provider, can be very, very close to the user to show information. The next thing I want to show you is another application which is very simple and which allows me to, this is my flight that I have to take tonight. So I see the status of my flight. This is the kind of thing that sometimes we want to check, we want to consult while I do something else. This is very common practice. So I can have my finance application open, but I can check my flight simultaneously. And this is multitask in real time. This same functionality is applicable in an RM or any other Intel application. We see how these two applications implement two different views. One is the complete screen view, and the other is what I call snap view. The snap view is reduced. It's like having two things pieced together. This is a reduced version that looks different. Why? Because the information is different. It's reduced. So the applications adapt to the new view. And it's interesting how we can run this in real time, going from one side to the other, and they are all simultaneous. Let me show you another application, which is called Planet ARG. This, for one specific country, takes all the sources or news providers and consolidates. So I have an overview which is very complete about the news in a given country. Here I'm going to open a specific news, and I will see how for this application I can share it and share it through the media. Or from this application, I can do a search in the same way as we saw before. And this application appears in the same model as we did before. And it can also respond to the concept of the snap view, to have this reduced view that I always, when you reduce it, it changes in the layout so that you can see the relevant things. Now this application, which implements the different services and capacities of Windows 8, we can announce that this was developed with a new GeneXus generated for Windows 8. This was the announcement. So first of all, to talk about GeneXus being available to generate this for Windows 8. And thank you for having invited us to make this joint announcement. And Eduardo, this is a pleasure for us to make this joint announcement. And let me invite the responsible of the generation of this generator of Windows 8, Mr. Silva, will tell us about this.
Good morning. Eduardo practically showed everything. I just want to show you another application, but I would like to talk about this new Windows 8 generator. It is a generator for the smart device platform that we have. You can generate for iPhone, BlackBerry, and Windows 8. It's also a new generator in the sense that we have generated for HTML5, which is one of the languages provided in Windows 8. I wanted to show you another application so that you can see from the GeneXus point of view how this generator works. And this application is here. This belongs to a prestigious soccer club in Uruguay that turned 121 years very recently. I'm starting to like this. Well, since last year we had another presentation, we tried to change the angle this year. This is sort of more historical oriented. Well, you will see. I have some history to show you in terms of soccer in Uruguay. We will get into this into more detail. Well, as you can see here, this is the main page that's called Manja, which is a Peñarol soccer club in Uruguay. For the people who come from abroad, Manja refers to the name of the Peñarol soccer club, which is the most prestigious one in Uruguay, of course. I can tell you that the translator is listening to me and not to you, so she has translated everything like that. Here you can see the main page. In GeneXus, this would be a dashboard. This is where I choose the work with. Here you can see all the news, and this is the list of our working with, or in every row you can see one of these rectangles, which are the different pieces of news. Some of them are larger than others. This is something new that we added in the Tilo version, so that you could design like this. In the trophies, here we have a problem because there were so many that we couldn't include them here. So we can get into this and we can see all of them. We had a scalability problem. Will you be showing the generator for stadium projects? Oh, no. Some other clubs have very small stadiums. That's why we won't be able to show it here. In terms of history, we had to summarize. So we did a semantic zoom, so we can see every year here, and we could navigate here. We could do that at the beginning of the story of Peñarol, when it was founded in 1891, so you can see how old it really is. So this is being announced by Microsoft. I just gave him the device. I will talk in more depth about this tomorrow, before we have a presentation by Pablo Garcia from Microsoft, and today we have Wilson Pais with an overview of Windows 8. And before we have one more announcement, before closing, thanks to some insiders we have, we want to thank Roqueta, because we have the application for the Nacional Soccer Club. Thank you very much, dear friends. Well, this was what we wanted to tell you in this first presentation. I just want to make one last question to that pragmatic programmer. All this that we mentioned, the new Windows 8 generator, smart device, full Ajax, etc., all these things, are they good news or bad news for that pragmatic programmer? Is it good or is it bad? Well, I cannot answer that question. And the reason why we included this presentation this morning is precisely to give you this overview of what we think is going on in the industry, so that you can have these 3 days in order to find an answer to those questions. By the end of the third day, I would like you to have a reply that this is actually good news for all the GeneXus community, and that we have an opportunity that's as good as ever in the world of software development. My dear friends, thank you very much.